Good evening. Hopefully, the sound is coming through okay. And I hope that the sound for the actual intro did play. I've been having a little bit of issues with StreamYard, but it looks to be like it's all resolved. Nice to see you, Kim and Grace. Listen, today we've got a couple of days of trial to go over. We did just speak on Masterson on Wednesday, I realize, but it's moving quite quickly in regards to the testimonies, and I think twice a week is going to be good to keep you up to date. Tony Ortega, as I said, is courtroom in the courtroom, doing his best to keep all the journalists and all the YouTubers and everyone interested, all of his subscribers, up to date on who's testifying, what's being done on both the prosecution and the defense side. Um, you know, if you haven't followed him on the underground bunker, please do. There are great details there that I'm not going to go into the minute details of everything, just the key points of the things that intrigued me or that caught my eye. Actually, um, we left off with Jane Doe 3's testimony. Prosecution was still um, asking her questions and doing direct. D.A. Mueller was the one running the questions. She was more precise this time. She was very calm. If you recall from the first trial, she got rather emotional a few times. She's had some panic attacks right there on the stand. The judge and everyone there is very conscious of the witnesses um, in general when retelling these stories and making sure that they have the time that they need and if they need a break. Well, she held up really well. It was noted by Tony. It was noted by several people in articles that this time around, uh, deep breaths and really trying to answer as concisely as possible. And one of the things that came up was those concise answers. It appears it appears that because now she understands what they're asking her, and she understands that it's up to her to give as much detail as possible, and then it's up to her to get it out as accurately possible, not to just depend on how the questions are worded, not to just depend on who's asking or what they're asking. Um, this has become something back and forth with the prosecution and the defense in regards to Jane Doe's testimony, and I do believe it will be in regards to all of the Jane Doe's testimony, because D.A. Mueller did bring up the differences in the reports, how things were done, when Jane Doe 3 started to distrust the reporting process itself, which appears to be from the beginning. Remember, Scientology didn't want her to. She went to Scientology and they didn't do anything about it. They had her, well, they did do something about it. That would be a misstatement on my part. Sorry. They did do something about it. They did tell her she must have brought it upon herself in their way, in their teachings. They told her that the assault couldn't have existed in the relationship that she had because that's the way things are. She was told again that it was her duty to provide for Danny what he wanted when he wanted it. Period. During that testimony, it struck me how much she went back to the fact that she did love him. She stayed. This was a committed relationship. She was now a Scientologist. She believed the teachings. Okay. She loved him and she wanted him to go to Scientology for ethics and to also realize that what he was doing to her was not exactly a good thing and how it might have made her feel. And that she didn't like it, but she wanted to work things out. Well, he refused because under the Scientology teachings, in his belief, he was fine. Everything was fine. He was successful. He was doing what he needed to do. He wasn't the issue. She should just go with it. That was what she reported to D.A. Mueller in the questioning, the final straw as to why she left the relationship. But admits that even when she left it, she still loved him, wanted better for him, wanted him to get help, wanted the relationship actually to work out. answering why she was still in contact with him a year later, why they had a tryst, a night. Uh, she gave very clear answers, painful answers. Uh, I think it's often easy to forget how difficult it must be to sit there and talk about an event that is probably the most humiliating and embarrassing thing that ever happened to you. And to actually have to tell everybody it was done by somebody who actually you loved and you thought loved you. That keeps coming up in my mind a lot during that testimony. Reading everything that she said, reading the questions. And it became very clear how difficult it was later when we get to the cross examination by Sean Hawley this time, who is a very strong attorney, very direct. She's not messing around. Let's just say she's very good at what she does. And what her job is as the defense is, let's be honest, clearly, fact. Her job is to undermine the story of Jane Doe 3 immediately. Her job is to make it like they make it up, that they've got ulterior motives, that they only want money. Mm. The problem is they're not doing it very subtly. And I hope the jury sees it. Because the way Sean Hawley, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, okay, I speak for no one else. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a reporter. I'm someone who likes to look at this stuff. It intrigues me. It's a hobby. But she's coming off way hard, way crass. She thinks that coming off as a strong, independent woman, knowing what she knows, is going to make some way with the jury. And she might be right because she's casting doubt everywhere. But I have to say, Jane Doe 3 did an excellent job based on her answers back to some of the questions. But it still struck me how difficult it must be to go through that. Jane Doe 3 made it all the way to the end of her testimony before she had a panic attack. And she was on that stand for 2.5 days straight. She was the witness. She was the first actual accuser, testimony, all from her, days. Prosecution goes in. And these are the kinds of questions that really kind of know. The first thing that they want to start about is because DA Mueller brought up the fact that they went over in detail when Jane Doe 3 contacted the FBI, which was after the first reporting in December to the LAPD, and after meetings with Detective Reyes, who all of the Jane Does have said they had issues with. But now it seems to be a bone of contention as to when they decided they had issues with them because they're trying to build this credibility thing and all this coercion story. So DA Mueller wanted to put it out there, like when she did and what happened, and who she spoke with and everything. Um, and Jane Doe did clarify after Sean Hawley first addressed her immediately. When did you contact the FBI? Who did you contact? Blah blah. It happened to be a friend of a friend. She got a name. She contacted them. Um, she wanted to know the reasons. And Jane Doe clearly said there were many. It wasn't just one reason. You know, was it because you were not satisfied or you had distrust of the LAPD? She said, no, not only, like not directly. Um, she said, it was more than that. She says, what else? Well, she talks about harassment. Just remember, from the start, all of these Jane Does were harassed by Scientology. Things were happening. Not only are they trying to report something that's older and people are not really responding the way they thought they would. They thought like a big investigation would happen right away. They thought that they would ask more questions for the details. They thought they would ask them all the questions they needed to carry forth. She reported she did not actually understand like exactly the process. Who would? I mean, it's not like she'd done it before. Um, it's not like she's not already emotionally challenged right now, right then, based on what happened, based on her recollection. Remember with Jane Doe 3, her realization that it was actually an assault against her will happened much later. She was clarified in her understanding of it by contacting Rain, by speaking with her now husband, who all clarified some of the feelings that she was having and clarifies what to call it. Because remember, Scientology told her it didn't exist. Sean Hawley had some exception as to how she went and reported to the FBI. She tried to make it that she didn't really distrust the LAPD at the time. But Jane Doe's answers clearly indicated it wasn't that she distrusted an individual like Detective Reyes right away, but she didn't trust the whole process of reporting, and she was scared of the interactions of Scientology. Okay. She talked about how Detective Reyes and her partner even joked about Scientology during the interview. Something about a curling iron being missing. And oh, it must have been Scientology because they were staying in a hotel or whatever. And something went missing. And they said, yes, it must have been Scientology. That there just kind of reinforced how she was feeling about the common knowledge that Scientology is going to interfere. You know, you got to worry about Scientology. Um, you go to the LAPD and they start mentioning Scientology too, it kind of like makes it like common idea, common theory, common knowledge. It reinforced her fear of the process, her distrust, I should say. Not outright fear of the LAPD, but distrust of what was happening. Okay. And based on the questioning and what's going on now, you can kind of see why. Mm. Sean Hawley's cross examination of Jane Doe 3 was very focused on keywords, meanings. Anytime Jane Doe answered something, she would challenge it back into rewording it and trying to say she meant something different than what she meant. And Jane Doe did a very good job of correcting her every time and going through. Um, I understand that that's part of the defense's way of handling things to try to focus on holes in a story or create inconsistencies or try to point things out to the jury that they should be looking at. But some of it to me was quite unnecessary. Shane Hawley specifically made Doe 3 walk through each event pace by pace, movement by movement, trying to pick out words. One of them was a statement that happened in the first trial when, in her reporting, Jane Doe 3 had said he was trying to, in regards to the penetration, and then later said he was doing it. She said, "Why would you say he was trying to, and then later say that he actually did it?" And Jane Doe was trying to explain, "That's how I speak. I'm Southern. When we say trying to, it could have already happened. It's just that's my language. That's how I do it." But it was challenged as to maybe he didn't actually do it. But she clarified again that's not what she meant, that, this is what I mean, I see the words there. This happened repeatedly, just like in the first trial, where they were taking statements that happened in 2017 and then later statements from to the prosecution, statements that were given to detectives, taking each statement and analyzing it sentence for sentence to see if a word is different or if there's more information. Okay. And this will become clear later when we talk about the expert witness, um, how these things happen. I mean, any of us right now could tell a story to even our best friend, honestly, today. And I could tell the same story a week from now. And some of the words are going to change. They should. Because if they don't, it means I've rehearsed it like some kind of practice vernacular that I've got to get down like a falsehood. The fact that there are inconsistencies to me because they're not major inconsistencies. They're not where it happened, how it happened, why it happened. Those consistencies don't change, okay? The act itself and the description of the act itself does not change. Words do here and there. Omissions of facts here and there in the telling of the story, that happens. Well, they're trying to make that out as if that is like because it's a made up story. And the experts will tell you that actually proves the opposite. That actually proves it's probably a true story. It's not even a story, it's an event. It's the recollection of an event that happened to them. Shane Hawley made a couple of questions that kind of stuck out to me, and I'd like to know how you guys feel about it. I'd like to talk about the fact that Shane Hawley actually asked her if her legs were open, and that Shane Hawley asked Jane Doe 3, "Did you say no?" And she said repeatedly, "I said no." She said, "You said no?" She said, "Yes." She said, "You said no more than once?" She said, "Yes." "Did you say it loudly?" Shane Hawley asked her. She said it loudly. They were in their private bedroom. She basically, okay, you weren't really saying no if you didn't scream and yell at the top of your lungs. This really got to me. But when it comes to the prosecution and the defense, I know the prosecution has to lay out a supportive case to prove why they believe Danny Masterson is guilty of what he did, why everything that these accusers are saying is true. And he's going to be focusing on the issues that prove it. And I understand clearly that the defense needs to look at all of that and find the weak areas of it and try to prove that the women are not telling the truth. Because in order for Danny Masterson not to be guilty, the event didn't happen. Now, is it true that women could organize and create a problem for somebody? Yeah, we've seen it. Just look at the Manson case right now. Most of those accusers that came forward just vanished. Those in the lawsuits have dropped them. Mm. There's a lot going on. There's actually testimony on file. Well, not the trial hasn't started yet. Let's just say depositions or mm, that show that there was some type of coercion. There were meetings, there were people that got together and compared things. There was a questionnaire they filled out in regards to the documentary that Evan Rachel Woods did. So yeah, they women do things like this. Yes, it's true. But I keep asking myself, why would these three women do that? Women that were in relationships with him. Why? What is their motive? Okay. People want to say it's money for the civil suit. Clearly, they didn't want to have to file a civil suit. Okay, but you'll hear testimony at the end of today. What happened today with Jane Doe 3's husband was testimony as to why they filed that lawsuit. How about the fact that Scientology harassed them horrendously? They've lost jobs, they've had to relocate. Their children are in therapy because of the things that have happened, the harassment that carries on. Should they have all the financial burden of that? When someone goes out of their way to cause you harm like that, financial harm, emotional harm, and in some cases, even physical harm, you have no recourse. They've filed charges of harassment against them. There's nothing anyone can do. So now let's just hit them and get them to stop this way. I think there's good explanation on why they would do it. The charges are clear. It's about harassment. It's against Scientology, David Miscavige, Danny Masterson, and everyone involved. And it's for the ongoing harassment. And that brings me to Another curious part of the cross-examination of Sean Hawley with Jane Doe 3. Sean Hawley entered an email into evidence after speaking about it. It seemed to be something not many were prepared for. I'm not sure if it came in like last minute, but it was approved. Judge Almeida said she would not let her read the whole thing out, but she could show it to Jane Doe 3 and they could ask questions on it. So she showed it to Jane Doe 3 and she started to ask, did she write it? And Jane Doe 3 clearly says to her, I wrote some of this, but this is not the email I sent. Well, that just opened the door wide open. You see, because things have changed in this trial. Judge Olmedo did several things in this trial a little bit different than the last one. Number one, the women are clearly allowed to make reference to the fact that they felt drugged. And we are clearly allowed to talk about how that could have affected their memory, how that could have affected how they felt about things, and the instances as to why they felt drugged. Who gave them the drink? When did they feel altered? What happened? Because during the first trial, it became very evident that every story had the same elements. There are now 5 people going on record saying that Danny Masterson did this to them. And each one of them are saying that Danny Masterson handed them a drink right before and that they started to feel physically different. And they started to have either lapse in memories, wake up in places they didn't understand how they got there, or needing help walking, feeling uninhibited, not able to control their body, or passing out. Mm. I agree, Crazy Cat. No means no. And yes, Anna, the harassment of the victim should be chastised. Judge Almeida is doing her best to keep Sean Hawley in line with this. She is allowed to ask the questions. But I ask you, why ask the question loudly? What, loudly? She asked her. She said no loudly. I was so offended for her. But I understand that Jane Doe 3, she kept her composure. She went through. She answered them all. She said loud enough. He heard him. There's no doubt. He was right on top of her, face to face. Why would she be screaming loudly? He's right there. It's in the privacy of their home. Who's going to come save her? I'm going to use a term here, but that seemed like victim blaming to me. I do understand we need to question the statements and the testimony that is there. It is the defense's right, and it should be to make sure that Danny Masterson gets a fair trial. I'm all behind it, but there's a little bit of common sense too. Exactly. The only one who needed to hear no, like Anna said, is Danny Masterson. It doesn't matter if she said it loudly or softly. Why are you trying to put that in the jury's head? To the benefit of Danny Masterson, to the benefit of Scientology's belief that she brought this upon herself. Well, there are 5 people giving affidavits to the same thing happening to them in the same manner. And we are going to talk about drugs now, being drugged. Now, they're not going to accuse Danny of doing it, but they're allowed to say that that's how they felt. They're allowed to say that those are the symptoms that would appear if it did happen. That's part of the trial for this one. It is going to come out, and that wasn't in the other one. The other thing that's actually going to be focused on is Scientology and harassment. And it came in full blast when Sean Hawley brought that email up because when Jane Doe said that that's not the email that she wrote in full, that's not it. There's only part of it in there. All that other stuff added is not me. They were now able to talk about the hacking that happened to Jane Doe 3 and her family and the other angels, how their socials were, how they were hacked into their computer systems, how they were harassed, how they started to receive threatening messages. It all just right out, right out in the open now. And Sean Hawley did that. And she mentioned harassment too when she asked, did you go to the FBI to report the harassment? And I'm wondering, why does the defense want to bring up the harassment? so much. And that is so they can get the civil lawsuit in my opinion, is so that they can talk about the civil lawsuit, which they did quite soon after bringing it up. So now we have on record Jane Doe talking about the harassment and what it was like. And that went on for quite a while. And I do recommend that you read uh, the underground bunkers details on. He will actually, when he does it, he lists the best that he can every question and answer. Who said what? And you kind of get the whole feel for it. But basically, it went back and forth, and it was horrendous what that family went through. You will hear more from it from her husband Cedric, which testified this afternoon. There will be challenges from the defense in those cross examinations as to why they are suing. Is it just a money grab? What is the what is the here? How much did it actually cost you? What is that going on? You know? Yeah. Nope, we could talk about Scientology, Mrs. Cassandra. That's the other thing that changed in this actual trial. We're allowed to talk about Scientology's harassment of the witnesses. We're allowed to talk about how the witnesses thought they were following Scientology protocol. And we will hear from Scientology ex-member who was pretty high up, Claire Headley, on those policies. And that it is fact. All right. Yes, and I agree. And it says it's unfortunate. This is a yes, and it needs to stop the harassment. Too many don't come forward because of the harassment, and that's right. Because everybody's kind of forgetting, like they're talking about this being the defense is trying to lay out that it's some type of organized conspiracy against Scientology and Danny Masterson. It's not true. Why are the other women coming forward? Why in trial number one did VZ come forward with a very similar story from a different time period? Also about accepting a drink from Danny Masterson, also being completely unable to control her body and waking up like half in a haze, half sleep, this and that. You know, in Jane Doe's testimony, I did talk about this in the first video of the week. Well, remember, I talked about they laid out how she actually met each of the other Jane Does, how it happened in who introduced who to whom, how it happened through third parties and accidental this and that, and looking for information. Um, there was no like hunt. There was no like it didn't look like a big plan to me. It just looked like it happened organically. And what really sold it to me that way was the fact that Jane Doe said when they actually talked with each other, the first time, the second time, even the third time, they didn't give details of their event with Danny. They understood that they already knew what happened with each other. They never compared stories or talked about did he do that or did he do this. It was just known. It was support why they first started talking. Support to someone, support for someone that you know exactly what they're going through. And support for someone that you know that they know they've been there. They know how you feel. Support so they're not alone. Well, the defense is going to keep going on. That's coercion just to make money. And I tell you this if it was coercion just to make money, why would they go and do all of this with the LAP? Why would it take so long? Why would it have taken so damn long? If all they wanted is money, this could have happened so much faster, so much quicker, and with a lot more PR. Why be Jane Doe's? You know, why try to resume your normal lives? Why not be out there with a mic in Hollywood? We've got models, we've got people connected to Hollywood here. Why not be out there just slamming it everywhere? But no, they didn't. So I think that that motive really doesn't stand up. I think maybe they're angry now that nothing's being done, and they have every right to sue in a civil suit, and I back it. Yeah. Because if you're going to cause that much harm to someone, you should have to pay. You're going to go out of your way to harass them, make them lose jobs, interfere with their banking, hack their computer systems, mess with their lives. You should pay. And I hope that that suit goes through after this trial. No, it is going to be a focus in here. Talking about Scientology is a focus in here. Well, there's a very important witness I want to get to next. If you don't have any other questions in regards to Jane Doe 3's testimony and or the cross-examination that happened by Sean Hawley, I'm gonna move on. Um, but I do know you do see the articles that come out and things like that, some of you. So if you have questions or you think of something later, don't hesitate to bring it. You know, I do want to talk about this stuff. I do know it's difficult. I do know it's difficult to talk about this stuff. There's a fine line between getting the truth out and victim blaming. There's a fine line to be having a strong defense and actually accusing people of lying right on the stand. Because basically that's what the defense is actually putting out there. Philip Cohen did it in the first trial. Sean Hawley's following that up in the second trial. They want you to believe that they're all lying. And it got me thinking. The possibility is there. Of course it is. And Danny Masterson should defend himself against it if the possibility is there. Okay? He deserves a fair trial. I'll stand by that. I really do. But what sticks out to me the most is how they all got together. The common threads in their stories that are not coerced. Other people coming forward after the fact with the same thing, documented through conversations with their friends, family, and husbands of what happened, dates, times, and who handed you the drink. Well documented. All actually able to be coerced, not coerced, but confirmed that it's not coercion. Okay. There's too many other people that saw what was going on, saw them at the party, saw Danny give them the drink, talked to them afterwards. There are collaborating witnesses to the testimony of all the Jane Does. Except for Jane Doe 3, in regards to what happened in the privacy of their bedroom, the actual event, no one else is there. It is just their recollection of this. Okay. The stuff before and after, there are other people around. Okay. But the actual event, no. It's going to be whether the jury believes what they're saying or not. And I hope they listen carefully at how careful they're being to say that they just tried to be honest. Because the other thing with Jane Doe's testimony, that I do want to read before we go on to Barbara Steve, was there was an interaction. Again, they're going to talk about the gun, not the gun, the slap. Okay. In her recorded testimony to Detective Reyes, Jane Doe 3 claimed that during the event where she pulled Danny's hair, that he hit her. She clearly said it wasn't a punch. She said on video, and they played it for the court. She clearly didn't say he slapped her. Detective Reyes said that. A slap with a question? And she said, no, I just know he didn't punch me. She never said it was a slap. She's not changing any of her testimony there. She keeps trying to explain that he didn't punch her, but it wasn't an open-handed slap. It was kind of a hit. And she can't actually explain what you would call it in between. Can you? Can any of you think of it? I can think of plenty of times where somebody just like has not a full fist like a punch, but puts their hand in a non-slap, open-handed position to hit you. But he hit her. And she said that repeatedly. This is how Holly framed the question. Do you recall telling Detective Reyes that it was just a slap? And calmly, Jane Doe 3 says, no, ma'am. I told her 4 times he hit me. And this is after seeing the video and looking at the detailed report that they printed. She did clearly say he hit me. I remember her saying it was a slap. And I said, yeah, because I didn't realize the significance of her changing my words. And I remember her later saying it was a slap. But I always said hit. And I want to make that clear. I am not trying to misrepresent it. She's saying it's become clear to me that I had to be very precise, but I'm not trying to challenge. I'm just trying to answer the questions that are asked me. She said, I thought that Detective Reyes knew what she was doing, and I didn't challenge the fact when she kept saying slap. She's been in sex crimes for 13 years, okay? I didn't realize how important it would be to correct a misstatement like that until now. She then picked on the facts, that she didn't go into great details about arms being pinned or feeling threatened or trapped or anything. And she said, I was answering the questions that I was asked. I reported 3 different incidences. I just recalled that she was asking me questions about each one, and I just answered the best that I could. And then Holly goes on again and says, and that's why you didn't say anything about screaming and yelling? And I just, again, I'm like, really? Really? We got to go there. And we're in a committed relationship. She was asleep. One episode, she just said no. And he was dragging her across the room. But clearly, Jane Doe just keeps saying, if I was asked, I would have answered. She talks about the differences between her statements to the prosecution, her statements to Detective Reyes, and her statements in the preliminary hearing. She's trying to make it like they're different. Well, basically, all they are is she doesn't talk in great detail about certain things that she does talk in other ones. Like there's might be more detail. All right. If she was asked about her arms being pinned, she answered. She was not asked by Detective Reyes, and she was not asked. It didn't come up as in detail with the prosecution. In the preliminary hearing, it was asked directly. But anyway, yeah, Anna, like a backhand. That's what I was thinking too in regards to the slap comment, you know. Mm. Something that she said really stood out to me, and these are Jane Doe's words. Because there are articles out right now, the AP Press, Reuters, the New York Times, Washington Post, in regards to Sean Hawley's cross-examination of Jane Doe 3. It's sticking out to more people than myself, actually, which in a way is very disturbing for me because it's quite obvious what they're trying to do, and they're actually victim blaming here in a way. I do believe they have a right to be a good, strong defense team, but some of the stuff that they're doing is just a bit much. And I'm really feeling for the Jane Does having to go through that on the witness stand. When I give them, I am immensely impressed at their fortitude to do it, their strength, and how they are able to just keep carrying on with it repeatedly, even now in a retrial, knowing what's going to happen to them after that first trial, knowing where they're going to go with the questioning. They're still there doing it again. That to me lends credence. It really does. Sean Hawley actually asked Jane Doe 3, is your testimony today that you can now remember things in 2023 that you didn't remember in 2017? And Jane Doe said, no, her memory hasn't improved. However, she's opened up more than she has before and willing to discuss things a little more openly, put words and labels on things that she wasn't able to before. that she is able to talk in greater detail about what happened. She's not saying she recalled details. She's not saying her memories have changed. Nothing's changed in her recollection of what happened. However, her willingness to speak on it, her ability to more fluidly get it out, to answer questions more completely has improved because of the process. One thing that hasn't changed is that she testified that she woke up to find herself being assaulted, that she told him to stop, that he didn't stop, that he did just after telling him to stop, he put his whole weight on her and pinned her down. And during the one event, he actually fought back enough to pull his hair to get him to. And that when she pulled his hair, that's when he hit her and started spitting on her. Sean Hawley focused on each one of those elements one by one. Sean Hawley said, when you spoke to the police detectives, you said that you were just trying to go to sleep when he kept bothering you to have sex and started assaulting you. And she said, that's the same thing to me. I'm Southern. We're trying to when we mean we're doing it. She meant she was sleeping, not trying to get to sleep. She meant she was trying to sleep, like she was sleeping. She also challenged the fact that when Jane Doe looked at Masterson during one of the attacks, he had dead eyes. She said, that doesn't make any physical sense. How can he have dead eyes? She really kind of made fun of her. She wanted her to technically explain how somebody's dead weight can be on you, but you can see their face. And she says, I don't know how that is, but I know his dead weight was on me and I know I could still see his face. I mean, she doesn't have an answer for that. Well, she knew she could see his face. Jane Doe just clearly kept saying that she didn't reveal every detail in initial interviews because she did not understand at the time how precise and careful she would need to be. Now that she has been given multiple official interviews and testified in court, both at the preliminary hearings and the first trial, I know better what is expected. I know how I need to actually get everything out like that. Prior, she was just answering the questions simply and wasn't giving great detail. She said, I wish I understood that in the very first interview that you give with a detective or a prosecutor, that you have to make sure your words are very literal and that you have to give every single detail, not just what they ask. Because respectfully, someone like you, Miss Hawley, is going to challenge me on that. I didn't know that at the time. I don't like to talk about these things. This isn't something I wanted to talk about. It takes me a long time to speak about things, and I was doing the best that I can, and I was being honest the whole time. She did get a little emotional under cross examination, but she remained composed. She had to breathe deeply and control herself several times. She apologized for having to take a breathing break here and there. She did the best that she could being challenged, and I commend her. I do. Oh, I know. I know. Okay, let's get to Barbara Ziv, who is the expert witness. Okay. Um, our expert witness is Barbara Ziv, and D.A. Mueller brought her forward instead of Mindy Mechanic, who gave testimony in the first trial in regards to assault victims not having lapses in memories, that perhaps that feeling of alcohol and drugs could have affected it, and things of that nature, how it was common to have gaps in the memory and to also be able to bring those memories forward later, or have spotty memory of an event, and then later some clarification on it. Well, forensic psychiatrist Barbara Ziv is going to clarify what she does actually. She's an advocate to provide treatment for assault victims, and for basically because she has a good understanding and a study in counterintuitive victim behaviors, the things we don't understand that victims do and why they might do it. Because not being a victim is not easy to understand. We all think we know what we would do in a certain situation, don't we? We do. I mean, it's just human nature. Mm. Haven't during this trial we all asked several questions? I know I did. I asked, why did they stay? Why would they continue to be with him after? Why did they still talk with him, have dates, go on relations? Why, in particular, did Jane Doe 3 stay with him and then actually, after they broke up, actually meet with him again in a very loving way? These were questions I had. I didn't challenge the fact that the events happened. I believe the story. I do. It's the way they tell it, the things that they're saying, and how they're saying it. It's the things they don't say that actually make me believe it. It's the fact that it's the clear fact of the process from how they filed that first interview with the detective, through the prosecution interview, and all the way through pretrial hearing, that the basic event did not change. What the details here and there were more of them. They didn't change, though. There's just more of them. There's just complete answers to questions. Okay. There's just clarifications on things. It's that whole process. I could see how that happened. The first day you show up to report something, um, if you could get every single detail in there on that first report to be able to go through a trial years later and not be contested, I would say it was a rehearsed speech. I'm just saying, it looks more natural the way it happened here. It looks more plausible to me, reasonable. Okay. So Barbara Ziv has been doing her craft for 25 years. She's licensed in both Pennsylvania and in California. She's got a medical degree. She also teaches at Temple University. She does blind testimonies, and what she says is blind testimony is she does not know the facts of the case. She's here as an expert witness to speak about what victims in general respond to and act. What are the counterintuitive victim behaviors? She's here to help the jury understand why victims would act a certain way. What are the percentages? What is reasonable? What do you normally see in your line of work? Not to say Jane Doe did this, Jane Doe 3 did this, Jane Doe 2 did that. I believe Jane Doe 1 when she says that. That's not what her testimony is about. Blind testimony is all about not having the facts of the case, but bringing into evidence uh, information to help the jury decide on other matters. Okay. This expert testimony is going to be about what counterintuitive victim behaviors are, how common they are, and the percentages. Okay. So they go over all her training, and some of her answers are going to be quite surprising for you. Okay. First of all, when they talk about, they use the term rape trauma throughout the trial here a couple of times. And D.A. Mueller asks her straight out, have you heard of that? And she says it's not a medical term. They don't use it. Um, they will use the trauma of the event, but it's more like a PTSD is more appropriate to be the medical term for what accurately reflects if you're going to diagnose what happens to the individuals of sexual assault. Okay. Um, when they use that term, they use it to describe a number of effects that might not rise to a medical diagnosis. In other words, rape trauma isn't a medical diagnosis. It's just a term to put a couple of behaviors together so that people know what you're talking about. She's done at least 300, she's done about 300 testimonies, blind testimonies here, mostly in regards to what trauma victims go through and their counterintuitive behaviors. They go into specifics that she does not know the case. She has not read any of the materials on it. She's just here to educate the jury about the common misconceptions of sexual assault. D.A. Mueller wants to know if there's a particular common counterintuitive victim responses and what they abbreviate as CVR. Counterintuitive victim responses. In Ms. Ziv says this involves what they call rape myths. They are widely held beliefs about sexual assault. Most people think sexual assault is done by a stranger. 85% is done by someone known to the victim. 85%. Another myth that the victim will fight back. In fact, even in stranger assault, fighting is only 15%. It is such an event, it's not common to actually physically fight back at the time. Verbal screaming, calling out is also relatively rare, only about 25 to 40%. And that is in a stranger assault. It's even less, much, much less when it's someone you know. Other misconceptions are that a victim of sexual assault don't have any subsequent contact with the perpetrator. Like I said, 85% of the assaults are done by someone known. It's not uncommon for them to have contact afterwards. Victims often have contact with them afterwards because they knew them. Even a relationship can develop. And this is all why they call it counterintuitive. It's very counterintuitive. She then was asked about resistance. Ms. Ziv reports that it testifies that it's unusual for a victim to fight back against a stranger, and it's even rarer against someone they know. When someone is being attacked by someone they know, it can be very confusing. It takes them longer to figure out what's going on. They don't want to believe it's happening. And in most cases, women use much more subtle forms of refusal, trying to change the subject, saying they're having their period. But force of saying no doesn't often happen immediately. It's much more a coercive and forcible situation. Most cases, people do not realize what's going on at the time, and they certainly don't resist physically or scream because they're not aware at that moment. It doesn't make sense to them at that moment. You see what she's trying to say? She's trying to say that, of course, you may be aware that something's happening you don't want, and you're pushing away and saying no. But you're not going to automatically think that the person you're in a relationship with is violating you. That is what's happening. But you're not automatically going to start screaming, yelling, and fighting because you're confused and trying to wrap around what is happening. It doesn't make sense. I can understand that. Then Mueller asks about concept labeling, known to a known offender, labeling something as rape. And Ms. Ziv testified that victims of sexual assault hold on to myths also. Victims believe assaults occur with strangers. So another myth is that women do something to bring this on. The way that they dressed, or where they went, or what they wore. And it's very common for victims to think they did something to bring it on. It makes it difficult for them to understand that it wasn't consensual and that it would have the term rape. It's a humiliating experience. Most women would prefer to forget about it and go on with their lives. And that leads to a difficulty of labeling it a rape or a sexual assault. It's hard to deny it happened and yet call it what it is. If you call it what it is, you have to believe a whole bunch of other things. You have to start asking, what did I do to deserve it? Why would he do this? Why did this happen? Is this how he feels? I thought he loved me. I thought he cared. No one wants to be a victim of rape. So they think maybe they did something to bring it on. Maybe he really likes me, maybe if I just do it this way, let me just see what it's like. These thoughts help them deal with it. You're trying to wrap your mind around what happened. And you actually don't. Who wants to believe that they were just assaulted with someone that they are in a committed relationship with, who you share their bed, their room, their house, their board? You have coffee every morning and dinner every night. Who would want to automatically think that? Well, Barbara Ziv's testimony made that clear to me. I always thought that. I always thought that it would be difficult if it was someone that you knew. No one would automatically go there and want that out there like that, want to even think of it that way. She also testified that the length of a relationship could be a factor. The longer that you're living with someone, um, even if you do get sexually assaulted, those women almost always go back. They stay. They try to figure out. They try to turn it into something else. They try. They try to just understand it, wrap their mind around it, turn it into something else because they don't want it to be that. They also were asked about whether there was any other kind of abuse in a relationship. Would it affect anything, like emotional abuse? And she said that there is a huge amount of literature on intimate partner violence, which can run from emotional abuse, being cold and withholding and calling names, all the way to extreme forms of physical abuse and actually sexual assault. That it's generally escalating. And those women who are involved in those situations seem to always go back, trying to fix it, thinking that they're doing something wrong. Like she said, the victims always think that there's something they did to bring it on. That doesn't make it true. She's saying that's a myth. And when the defense goes along that design, that's what victim blaming is about. When you support that. Lots of things, she says, bring the victims back into the relationship. Things like not believing it's true, not wanting to believe it's true, wanting to believe that they cared about you. There are lots of things that draw them back, including the fact that no one is like that all the time. Remember, this is the person that you spend all this time with, that you have all these other good memories and good relations with, and good prior sexual acts with. No one is an evil human being 24 hours a day, she testified. So often, women go back looking for the man who was better to them, making excuses. Maybe he was drinking. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe, but that's the one who did this is not the man I fell in love with. She clarified about post sexual contact, post assault sexual contact. Does it occur in a relationship of many years, especially? And she said, yes, it does, almost always. There are quite famous cases about that Craigslist rapist man who would actually attack someone on a first date, and then many times these women came back and developed relationships with him, which was quite confusing. But they didn't want to believe it was an assault. They wanted to believe that he cared about them in some way and that they could turn it into something better. That perhaps if they turn it into something better, it's not about them then. If they recreate something good between them, it brings the goodness in that person out and the goodness in them out, and it makes that not have occurred. Sometimes whitewash it, almost like blur it out, turn it into something else. She was asked what would the impact of someone in a living relationship not getting what they want, um and then going into the other room, avoiding the person, just being cold. She said that most victims feel, mm, that they've done something wrong, that behavior, it's debilitating, to the relationship. In most cases, the victims will begin to blame themselves, think it's them, that is causing it. And it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That dynamic of having someone making you feel bad about yourself. um, People do what they can to feel good about themselves in what, you know, so they try to find a remedy for it. They try to fix it. That is what women and victims traditionally do. Is it, again, he keeps reiterating, is it normal to have post incident contact? Is it unusual? And she keeps saying it's not unusual. Like she said, she's examined thousands of victims of sexual assault, and it's quite common for there to be post incident contact. She said that there was a paper in 2022 about assaults on college campuses. 70 or 80% of the victims had subsequent contact of some type. They have it for a lot of reasons. Well, they start with wanting to make sense of things. They want to understand. So, what's the impact of sexual assault? It's psychological. Sexual assault is psychologically damaging. It makes the victim feel horrible about themselves, like they don't matter in this world, worthless, dirty. It's a psychological injury. What is the person going to do about it? Well, they address it. They try to find answers. They try to make themselves better by um, having contact with that person, making them feel less worthless, making them try to understand it. And now it often doesn't turn out that way, she said, but it does help them to understand. It does help all of us to understand why a victim would have post assault contact with someone. Why would there be subsequent contact? She said women do set boundaries with that contact often. Um, she doesn't expect everybody to write out a contract, of course. But she said, of course, there are boundaries and limitations to what someone will allow to happen to their body. And in the event that it is someone you know that assaults you, you feel they already know those boundaries. So it becomes even more perplexing and complicated as to why they would do that. He asked how many people actually report sexual assault. It's among the least reported crime. Only about 15% of the time does it actually get reported. Most women don't report sexual assault, and when it is reported, it was prosecuted even less. And stranger reports are more common than when it's someone you know. If assaulted by someone you know, the women are less likely to report it. He asked if you've not been a victim before or involved in the legal system, would you expect open statements to be given? And she gave a very clear answer. I don't know if it matters if someone has experienced it or not, because the assault itself is very difficult to talk about. People are going to ask you about your private parts, your genitalia, or what put what where, who did what, where was their hand, where was this, all of that. It's uncomfortable. It's one of the reasons people don't report. It's not unusual for someone to give a piecemeal disclosure here and there, just having it to be drawn out, uh, to give away a little bit of information, hoping that that's enough, that that's what will confirm it or whatever. It happens in all cases of sexual assault, regardless if they have previous experience with the legal system or a previous assault or not. The issue itself is very difficult to talk about. Mueller wants to ask, that Mueller then asks Barbara Ziv in regards to talking about things years later, burying it and bringing it up. And Barbara Ziv said if it's the person's normal coping mechanism to shut down, then it would be very difficult to talk about. And then, of course, it would take some time. And then they talk about drugs and date rape drugs. And how do drugs affect CVR? And she says that it impairs your motor coordination, your memory, your ability to make judgments. It makes people feel very confused about what happened. Um, these drugs go from alcohol, which is common, to GHB, which is the most powerful, and it impairs the memory. And she explained that during a traumatic experience, the memory is focused on key facts and other peripheral things become lost. In other words, the small details, the minor things. You become more hyper focused on the key things that are going on. And he then he then asked the difference between a blackout and being unconscious. And she pushed back, saying that being blacked out, is being unconscious. If you are intoxicated, you can have flashbulb memory. So you may have fragmented memory. She's a physician, and she said she wouldn't call that a blackout. A blackout implies loss of consciousness. There is no medical term, blackout. You talked about multiple interviews over a period of time. She clarified that proper interviewing techniques are important. What is recorded depends on the interviewer. If something isn't asked, it may not be divulged by the victim. Remember, they don't want to actually speak on it. They're already uncomfortable, humiliated, embarrassed, confused about the fact that it even happened and why. If 5 people interview one victim with 5 different techniques, you're going to get 5 different answers. You may get 5 different answers, she said, in some way. But they'll basically be telling the same story. It's just going to come out in different words. Women who experience a prior assault, does that have an effect? She actually reports sadly that individuals of assault are more likely to be assaulted again because of the psychological problems. If you have 2 assaults, it can, yes, influence all the behaviors that we've been talking about, the going back also. She talked about when, the fact that Jane Doe 3 stuck around. Okay. She says someone sticking around after an assault. She says it happens all the time. They don't get up and leave. Why they stay is as complex as the other things that we're talking about. They may stay because they're intoxicated or embarrassed, or they hope that this person who assaulted them can make it better by saying, I adore you or something, or make it into something it wasn't. But almost universally, they do stay, especially if they knew him. It is not uncommon to hear statements from, she reported in her testimony that it was not uncommon to hear sexual assault victims say some rather harsh things about themselves. That often they will have sex after assault because, well, why not? They're damaged goods anyway. I'm trash. I'm ruined. It's not uncommon that they stay with that one because now they believe nobody else will want them. And D.A. Mueller left it at that. When we get to the cross-examination, the first thing that Holly wants to know is about rape myths. She says the concept of having a rape myth presupposes that there was a myth. And Dr. V says yes, because that's about rape. But if there's no rape, then that's not applicable, right? She said, no, rape myths are widely held, whether you feel you were raped or not, the things that people believe about them. I think we're saying the same thing, but if someone wasn't raped, then there would be rape myths about it or about post-rape contact. What Joel's testifying to is that there are no absolutes about victim behavior. No, what I think I'm talking about is not that. A victim might report immediately. She said yes. They might report years in the future. Yes. They might never report. Yes. So you're saying that the victims could have contact or not have contact afterwards? She said yes, but the majority of them do. That's what her testimony. Well, she said she wanted to know about being a blind expert. She was asked to reword it by the judge. Because it seemed like she was challenging the fact that she was an expert, but they just wanted a clearer definition on who gets to decide whether she knows about the case. And she just said that she's been asked to examine a victim or perpetrator in order to answer a question. Is a perpetrator competent to stand trial? That wouldn't be blind. There has to be a specific question for me to answer if she gets all the details. A situation like the one today, is it common that you're a blind expert without all of the information? And she said, yes, that is most common. All right. She said that they all spoke in hypotheticals. Mueller had asked about these hypotheticals. And she kind of pointed out Sean Hawley. She said, so when you're speaking in hypotheticals, you're not complete or accurate. And she said, well, they're hypotheticals, and I don't have a way of knowing about the case or how they relate to the case. So I can only speak on the percentages and what commonly happens. There were no hypotheticals where you said, no, that would never happen. And she said, yeah, because the answer I was giving was in particular of a particular hypothetical, and I was giving the percentages in the majority of what someone would, how someone would respond. Well, she talked about blackout status and unconsciousness. She said people in general are very poor in judging how intoxicated someone else again is. She also criticized the use of the term blackout because she said it's either conscious or unconscious. Blackout doesn't mean anything. The people observing them in these states have no real understanding of the level of intoxication that they may be. She was pushed back on a lot, and it appeared that Sean Hawley was really trying to say that, well, you're just speaking about statistics and everything, and I kind of got the feeling that Sean Hawley wanted the jury to believe that we shouldn't believe an expert who actually talks with victims every single day, that she wouldn't know what the majority of them say, and that she doesn't have any real expertise in actually being able to put that forward. I hope the jury does see through that. The woman's been doing this for a very long time. She spoke on facts. Okay. One of the things that did happen that I should mention is she did give reporting on how often people will lie in police reports of these kind of assaults. And Barbara did give a percentage of somewhere between 2 and 8%, which is pretty small percentage considering. But for some reason, when after the testimony was done, after the cross-examination was done, Hawley asked to speak to Judge Olmedo. Judge Olmedo said she was going to review some case laws. She asked the clerk to pull something up, and then that particular line was stricken from the testimony. Just the percentages that she spoke about false reporting. That would be good on the defense, if they were attacking either the report or anything. If they had any leeway at all to get that fact out of there, that's a good job on the defense's side, because that fact alone works really strongly against their defense that they're coerced, they're just lying about everything. The fact is, most people will not go through this, will not put themselves through this for a lie. They wouldn't be on that stand going through what they did. They wouldn't be doing all of these interviews with detectives and lawyers and prosecutors. They wouldn't have to tell one of the most horrible things that ever happened to them over and over again and be challenged on it every step of the way as if they're not telling the truth. I don't believe somebody would really, I'm sure there's somebody out there that would. I just really don't believe they are. I just don't. Yep. They're fighting it. Well, by the way, that's Sean Hawley. She's very smug. And this is how Danny Masterson shows up for court now. He's looking more like the Danny we knew from the 70s show. Or he let his hair get a little bit longer. And he does look a little more confident. They are attacking the victim's head out on this one, because they know there's going to be more evidence coming forward, more things that are going to be allowed to talk about. I don't. I understand it's part of the process. Well, it's also part of the process to pick out when they make the mistakes. Okay. Well, so you talked about the blackouts, talked about facts and percentages of normal behavior. She also said, do you look at whether the accuser might have a motivation to lie? And she said, yes. And she said, there might be a number of them. Motivations to lie? Yes, there are. But the rate of false reporting, like I said, was only 2 to 8. Um, she asked how that could be determined. And she says, it's interesting that you asked that. And then that's when she brought up the study. And that is actually how everything got stricken. Something about that study, I'm thinking, but it's not been clear yet. I'm looking for more to come out on that. Perhaps there'll be a sidebar that will or there'll be an opinion put out. She then just talked about she asked Sean Hawley asked, would you agree that assault cases are often difficult to prosecute because there are only two people there? And she said, yes, but there are other determinations to find a false complaint. And she said, and how often do you actually testify on the defense's side? And she said, I have testified the defense, but I do more often testify for the prosecution. And then they talked about how much that she got paid. And when Mueller came up for redirect, really the only thing that he said, are certain rape drugs that put you on the same continuum as the way alcohol works? And Barbara Ziv clarified that there were whole classes of drugs, benzodiazepines, that they're used in medical practice to put you to sleep or to relax you. And that yes, they would work like alcohol. And then he said, no further questions. And that's when the objection came up. After some discussion, Judge Olmedo said that they were going to strike from Dr. Ziv's statement. The rate of false reporting is only 2 to 8%. So that sentence comes out. Okay. They concluded then on Thursday, and they started today in the first actual um, testimony was going to be from Jane Doe 3's husband, Cedric. Mm. He's most of his testimony, they're going to bring up how Jane Doe 3 just had the conversations with her husband in regards to the event that happened and how he clearly had told her that that was assault. And it started her calling Rain to find out and investigate it a little more, and to where she then really believed that she was raped. Um Cedric was never a Scientologist. He said he understood it because he saw some pamphlets, like he understood what it was. Um, he talked to his wife about Scientology because she would often get phone calls about staying on course and taking courses and things. Um, he said he was just taking some courses. He wasn't really a member. He doesn't feel he was that invested in it. He talks about meeting Danny Masterson. Um, uh, he says he did not know his wife when she was actually dating Danny, and if she didn't know Danny then either. And they talked about Cedric and Jane Doe 3 getting more involved in Scientology in 2010. Um, that they didn't really see Masterson, but they were assigned to seats behind his family at the shrine, but they don't really remember the year or how that was. They do remember his family being there, his mother. They have things um uh that they had conversations. and just casual conversation in regards to how they met through there, and also how the actual conversation in regards to what Danny did came up. So because Danny is famous and everything, and she did date him, and she told him about it and stuff like that, that came forward when they actually had to discuss her waking up that time with pain and stuff. And about how Masterson reacted to her confronting him about it. And that is when the whole conversation kind of went into full. And Cedric is the one responsible for talking her through it. And as a couple, I can imagine that was, um, for her. I'm glad she had someone to listen to her, and that she was able to finally start to understand her feelings about it, and have the support from someone who believed her, who understood what it meant, how she might be feeling. And he was also very angry about it because she didn't consider what happened to her to be assault at the time. And he was explaining, not convince her that it was, but to say why he felt that it was. They said the first time that they talked about it was really only about 20 to 30 minutes. Um, and that he does admit to getting angry, um, because he said it was assault, and uh, he was angry someone would do that to her. Um, and that she had a hard time talking about it. She talked about how good Danny was to her at certain times, and she was still really trying to wrap her mind about that was what it was. Okay. Especially with the teachings of Scientology. And so the conversations keep going on. And Jane Doe will report that she did then go to Rain. They first started talking about this after 2010, but it took until 2016 for her to report it to actually come around. Remember, that first conversation with her husband, she didn't want to believe that it happened, and so they just moved on. He was upset because she wasn't reacting the same way that he did, what he understands now. And that comes out in the testimony as to the Scientology teachings and what she was scared, she was angry. Um, he was angry, really angry that somebody did that to her. Um, they were living in Texas in 2016, and that's why her first report of the assault, once she realized what happened, was in Austin, Texas. He did not uh, get contacted by the LAPD back then. Once she got the LAPD involved, they got involved. They never contacted Cedric. But in 2022, he admits that he had a 15-minute conversation with Detective Vargas, who, in the testimony it comes out, was assigned after Jane Doe 3 complained to the chief and to internal affairs that she was losing confidence in the investigation, and they assigned Detective Vargas to the investigation for fresh eyes. And so in 2022 is when more contact with people in regards to the case was happening out of the LAPD, by Detective Vargas and others, and some of the people that Jane Doe had indicated would have information. Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 1, everyone involved. Then they were started to get contacted by this other person. And that was due to Jane Doe 3's actually actively sending emails and complaining letters. He admits that during the interview with Detective Vargas, it was only 15 minutes. He more than likely didn't give great amounts of detail of the actual assaults that she described, because there was a insane amount of detail in um, just that she had told him about it. They talked about changes in her demeanor, which got over were objected to by the defense to see if she changed her demeanor once she filed. Okay. Um, was asked straight out, do you believe that you've been stalked and harassed? And he says, absolutely. And do you believe that that harassment is coming from the Church of Scientology? And he said, I absolutely believe in my heart of hearts that the stalking and harassment comes from the Church of Scientology because of their policy of fair game. And he says it started right after she reported to the police in Austin. Then they go on and explain that fair game policy. If you've seen Leah Remini and Mike Render's um, series on this, they go into great deal about it, more than I could. But they were definitely, there is an absolute policy. It spoke about often in ex-Scientologist circles here when they're doing their YouTube videos, their podcasts, their articles, their series. It's a thing. Mhm. So they ask kind of what he knows, like in a nutshell about it. And he says, just basically, if you're a critic of the Church of Scientology or any of its upstanding members who are being successful, they'll do anything to get to you, to be silent, to ultimately, as it says, get them to sue for peace. You mentioned suing. Have you and Jane Doe entered into a lawsuit? And they start talking about that they're suing the Church of Scientology, David Miscavige, and Danny Masterson. And are there actual monetary damages that are being sought? Yes. And he says, for what reason? My children need a lot of therapy. So, yeah, we're suing for money. We have targets on our back. So, yeah, we're suing for money. Are you suing solely for monetary reasons? No, we're suing to stop the harassment. We're suing so my children don't have to see strangers staring into the window. Mueller ends his examination. This time, Philip Cohen steps up to cross-examine. He says, you love your wife very much? Yes. You want to help her any way you can? Yes. And you have felt this through the course of your relationship? Yes. You indicated you married in June of 2009. I think it was July. I'm a typical man. I need reminders. I don't recall. When did you meet? It was 2009. A little before we got married. The courtship wasn't that long. Do you have your phone with you? You apparently got married in June 2009. I'm curious when you met. When you say a couple of months, was it April or May? And so he says, well, maybe April. Well, when did you move in right away? Right. When did you move in together? He says. And Cedric answers right away. Within a few days of meeting. What does right away mean to you? He says, maybe a month into it or so. The way I see proceeding quickly, that's not normal to me. Did she move in with you on her own free will? I believe so, yes. Those are two different answers. She moved in and married you of her own free will? Yes. In addition to suing for peace, there also are some monetary damages, yes? And he says yes. And not just your lawsuit, but the other Jane Doe's. Yes. And specific monetary damages? Yes. Those include special damages? Yes. General damages? Yes. Treble damages? I don't understand what that is, he says. Have you seen your complaint? Did you read it? I mean, he was being very, very contrary. I looked at it, but some I do understand and some I don't. And we're not close to that. So when it comes to that, I will look more closely. When was it filed? And he's not exactly sure of the date. But he says they do recall it being filed in the summer of 2019. At the time it was filed, you could have asked your attorney about the damages, yes. And do you recall the complaint asked for treble? And he's just going on and on because he doesn't understand about the treble. He's just nitpicking at this point. It's not really come up to anything. So he won't stop about it. So Judge Olmedo says she's going to step in right here, and she interrupts Philip Cohen and says she's going to step in and have Philip Cohen pursue something else in the line of questionings because she got tired of this back and forth, and I don't blame her. So then they say, he starts about his prior testimony. And he said he was under oath in October. He said, and then you gave a statement to Detective Vargas in October. Yes. And you didn't strike me as someone who is shy to speak your mind. And he said that was fair to say. When you were interviewed and testified, you spoke your mind. He said yes. And he said, after speaking to Vargas, did you have contact info for him if you wanted to get in touch, and he said yes. Um, and he said, and if you wanted to get in touch with DA Mueller or DA Anson, you could reach them. And he said yes. Um, he said also, you say Mrs. Masterson's mom, Mr. Masterson's mom, is she here today? And he said yes, and he has her recognize her. He said that you claim that Mrs. Masterson gave you a certain look at some Scientology event you were in 2010 with Jane Doe 3. Since that look, have you ever made any mention of that look to Detective Vargas? And he says, no, I didn't. He says, did you mention it to anyone else? And they go on and on. He says, when you were interviewed previously, did you mention? He said, no, but I'm saying it now because I'm saying it. He said, in the prior testimony, did you mention it? He says, no. He said, did you speak with your wife after her testimony? He said, briefly, but he said, you also said your children need money for therapy. And he said, yes, they do. Did you mention that to Detective Vargas? And he said, no. Or Anson? No. Why would I? Mueller? No. He said, he just goes back and forth about things that he spoke about and answering if he actually mentioned it. And then he clarifies that he answered questions. He goes, he says, when you testified, were you complete then? He said, yes, but complete leaves gray areas. I think what you're requiring is filling in every detail, which was not possible at the time. I remembered questions. There were no heavy details in the questions from Detective Vargas. He says, and I'm not as skilled as these proceedings as you are. I'm not, he's not an attorney. And Judge Olmedo actually comes in and says, next question, please. Like, get off it. Like, they just, because the back and forth took quite a bit. There's more than I'm saying, just back and forth. Did you say this to this one? Did you say that to that one? Did you do this? It went on for quite a while. Judge Olmedo just interrupted the whole thing. And then finally, they go to the next question. When you talk to Vargas, what would you been the first interview that you ever gave to the LAPD regarding this? And he goes, yes. The first time that anyone from the LAPD spoke to him was when Detective Vargas contacted him in October of 2022. And then it's clarified that it was the first time he spoke to anyone in law enforcement, even the ones in Austin PD with the first report. He asked if he had gone with Jane Doe 3 in reporting to Austin Police Department, and no, she didn't. But they did speak afterwards. Of course, they're married. I mean, I don't know what the big deal is there. He asked if he was truthful, if he wanted to be truthful with Vargas in 2022. And he said, yes, to the best of my ability at the time. And he said, let's talk about that. Whatever you remembered, you told him. Did he give you the time you needed to answer? Yes. Did he rush you off the phone? No, he didn't. What you then did was you provided him a complete response to the questions he asked. And of course, they say objection asked and answered. So he reframes it. Do you know if your conversation was tape recorded? And he doesn't know if it was. There is a report prepared on it. Yes. Did he ever review it? And he said, yes, he did. After he reviewed it, did you ever tell him this portion is wrong? No. Did you ever tell him you left this out? No. Did you ever tell the prosecution there was nothing missing? There was nothing wrong, nothing missing. I'm telling you what I'm telling you now. When I expand on the subject matter and I'm being truthful and honest. So you're saying your memory is better today than in April, than today, April 2023, than it was when you spoke to Vargas in October of 2022, or a conversation that took place in 2010. I think he says in these is his answer, and I'm going to quote him. I think in these proceedings and hearing all the details, some stuff jogs my memory, and this is go time now, so I'm saying it now. And he was annoyed, and I don't blame him. It goes on and on and on, and you could see that they're trying very much to say that they're adding details they think will matter that aren't really true. But the details are the details. And it is true that they may not have been in report one, they may not have been in conversation one, but they're not actually. Here's the thing. The one thing I hope the jury sees, and I hope you in the chat see, and anyone who watches this, or anyone who goes over Tony Ortega's reporting of this, when he goes in this back and forth, they are challenging how the information got out there. Well, let's be clear. They got no challenge for the actual information. They have no challenge to the actual information. Let that sink in. This is lawyering 101, really good. They're really good at it. Okay. Attack who's saying it, not what was said. All right. Victim blaming. Let's just make it all look like coercion and lies. Like, let's just make it like they're money grubbers. Okay. Let me ask you, is it reasonable that a husband who is helping a wife who has been convinced by Scientology that something didn't happen, is clearly suffering the effects of what did happen, is still trying to wrestle with it, helps her try to understand it, has to deal with the fact that something terrible happened to her too, and then help her through that process, building her strength. She does the report on her own. What does it mean that he didn't go with her? Nothing. Does it mean that he was confident enough that she could handle it? I mean, the question didn't get asked, if she wanted you there, would you be there? Because I'm sure that answer would have been yes. There was no reason given as to, I didn't want to be involved. This man was supportive the whole time. He answered all the questions that were asked of him. It's her story to tell. She's wrestling with the Scientology end of it and the fact that it even happened. And Philip Cohen is going to say, well, did you do this? Did you do that? I don't know. It looked pretty petty to me. And I hope the jury sees it too. Because they're going after the way things got said, but not the fact that was laid down. No one is actually going against the information that was provided, just how it was provided. This is becoming more and more evident to me in this trial in particular. It kind of had an inkling of it in the last one, but it's pretty prominent this time. They talk about his religion, not being a Scientologist anymore. When they talk about her actually telling him about what happened, Philip Cohen gets into great detail about when she spoke, or did she use the word anal. At this point, he says, according to what you told Vargas, at this point in the conversation, there's been no mention of anal sex. Would reviewing the report refresh your recollection? And he said yes. And Judge Olmedo has the jury go into the jury room while the document is being looked at, okay? And then she admonishes Dr. Philip Cohen about the same thing she said to Mueller, that she is going to stop them from asking the same question different ways over and over again. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay. And I'm glad she said that. Okay. Um, and then they talk while the jury isn't there about Scientology and civil lawsuit parameters regarding this witness, and that she will always give the jury abominations later. But they are allowed to talk about the influence. They are allowed to talk about how they felt they were being harassed, how they felt the policy was. He was in taking courses with Scientology at the time. Jane Doe 3 was a Scientologist at the time. They knew what to expect. Okay. So he looks at the report, and they go back over the report again, the October report from Detective Vargas that Cedric gave. Okay. He talks about when did your conversation with your wife get heated? Because Cedric does admit that while they're talking about this and he's saying it's assault, she keeps pushing back that no, that's not how it was explained to her, and everything Scientology told her about it. So he was getting annoyed, and he said, Philip Cohen brings up, well, at one point, you said that Jane Doe 3 got a little argumentative with you and you got a little bit angry. And he said, yes. And he said, and that occurred before any discussion of the Anal Sex Act of 2001. And he said, yes. He said, you got angry because you just found out that she was on good terms with Masterson. He said, yes, because it surprised him that what he felt was an actual assault, she would have anything to do with him. And that's not uncommon. We just heard testimony. People don't understand that. People that deal with victims understand it. They see them going through it. There's a lot of reasons why it happens. There's a lot of reasons why Jane Doe 3 wanted to still have conversations with Danny Masterson. The fact that she loved him for so long was one. And no wonder her husband was a little bit upset. He was a little bit jealous. That's what Philip Cohen wants everybody to believe. But Cedric said it wasn't jealous. What I could tell was that she was holding something back related to Masterson. She didn't tell him the whole story. And that's when all of this started to come out. But she didn't say that to Vargas. Why would he? He said, you weren't accepting that Danny Masterson and your wife had a platonic relationship. And he said, that's right. But she can be friends with anyone she wants. And he said, yes, she can. And you told her you did not approve of this relationship. I did tell her I did not approve of her being friendly with Danny Masterson. So you're getting mad over the friendship. I was getting mad because I could tell there was something she wasn't telling me. And so that's when they started arguing. That's when all this stuff comes out in 2010. He's trying to get to the fact that he just thinks that he might be giving testimony against Danny Masterson because he's jealous. He wanted to know if the arguments were reported when speaking with Vargas, and he says they were. They talk about the details of it. Talk about feelings of when she was talking to her husband that she said that she felt hungover when she woke up after one of the assaults, things like that. Especially the one where she was literally asleep and then something happened and she woke up with the repercussions of it. Um, Did she then tell you that she felt hungover? He said, that's where I'm wrong. That was my assumption because of the words that she was using, like fuzzy headed. She didn't understand, confused. He said, did you tell Detective Vargas that she said that she felt up hungover? He said, yes, I did say that. He said, and are you telling me that he wrote it down wrong? I said, no, I'm telling you I said it wrong. So you did tell him that she told you she woke up hungover? Yes. Well, when did you realize that you told him something that wasn't accurate? He said, when I reviewed my transcript. Again, they got instant answers. He goes over and over again about hungover, again and again. And you can see that Judge Olmedo, according to reporting, is getting very annoyed, and I don't blame her. I want to get down to right in the middle of it. They want to know why he never reported to Detective Vargas that his wife had said she felt drugged, that she believed she was drugged. He said that the reason he didn't is he was in the middle of a tour, and I had to memorize a lot of stuff. I was undergoing a lot of harassment at the time with Scientology, and I think it's a lot of stuff to memorize. I think it's pretty normal for a person not to remember every single detail. But if I was asked if she said it, I would have been able to tell you yes. And he kind of like Cohen kind of snarkily just tells him, so the reason you didn't tell Vargas was you were overwhelmed with so many things, right? He says, so have you told him since 2022 that she said she'd been drugged? He says, no one has asked me. I have not reported that. I had not said that. But yes, I am telling you, as you asked, that she did say it. Did you ever mention Philip gets pretty detailed here. Did you ever make mention to Detective Vargas that JD3 woke up really late in the morning or into the afternoon? He says, I'm not recalling. So he then brings out the transcript of everything and he says, did you make mention to Vargas that she told you she did not wake up until the late morning or into the afternoon? And he says, no, she never told you that, correct? I don't recall. Did she tell you that at some point Masterson had held her down and raped her for 30 minutes? She did, but not in those exact words. My question is, did you tell Vargas that? He said, no, I didn't. I didn't get asked by Vargas what my wife actually told. Here's the thing. They're trying to say that it didn't happen because if it did, he would have told him every detail. Could you guys answer? I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it crazy like that. But if you're in a relationship with someone and something that horrible happens, that intimate, that humiliating, that embarrassing, and you know your partner is dealing with it, do you feel responsible to give all the actual details of every word that your partner said to the detective, if not asked by that detective for the information? I mean, yes, answer their questions, but are you sitting there and going word by word everything they said and telling a whole big story on it? Are you narrating the situation for them? I wouldn't be. I don't think anybody. I don't know. Am I looking at it? Okay. So you would tell them every detail of what the person told you. So like your partner tells you about the assault in great detail, how they felt, what was going on, all that emotional stuff. I don't know if it meant saving your wife. I get what you're saying. But here he's questioning. Vargas is not, it's not that he withheld information. It's just that he didn't go into great detail. And that's what they're trying to say, that there's something wrong with that at this point, you know. Anyway, it gets a little bit crazy. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, they take their lunch break after that, and I'm not going to continue with the rest of the day's testimony because then it goes into Jane Doe 1, and I want to give that a lot of attention. A lot was said. So, on our next update, we will start with the late afternoon of Friday today, and that will be Tuesday, and it will include Monday also and some of Tuesday morning. Yeah, some people have shitty memories, and that's what he's saying in some of it. You know, I agree with you. I agree with you, Beck. Like some people just have bad memories and they're just not actually able to convey the whole thing. And not to mention that it's upsetting for him anyway, you know. Hey Shill, good to see you. And Anna, thank you for being here, and T King. And anyone else that I did not mention, Skiscrasser, or anyone else who came in while I was narrating the events of the last 2 days in the trial. Well, as I agree. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to put them in on the back of the videos. You know, that's the best place for me to get right back to you on any of the Masterson videos. I do get updates for all comments, so I will see it. I don't delete anything. Just I'll put your answer there. If you want even greater detail, I'll send you some information. But basically, we're just trying to put the parameters of the testimony out there in what it's looking like to me. I've got questions. Um, yeah. Well, if you guys don't have any, then I'm going to close out. Mrs. Cassandra, in answer to your question in regards to Nick Carter, um, I'd have to look into it. I will tell you this. I do not feel the need to cover every murder or every assault case. If there's not anything particularly astounding about it, just the fact that he's famous or that it occurred, it's not going to do it for me. I hate to disappoint everybody, but this is a hobby and it needs to mean something to me, each case, which is why Stouch and Valo are really driving me crazy. And I will continue with them till the end. But this is, if you don't feel invested in something, it's pretty difficult to deal with these kind of details. So I am invested in the Masterson trial fully, because of some of the legal things that are occurring in it that means something to me. And that is the legal definition of consent and how it needs to be more cohesive state to state and more defined into the different areas, especially in sleep assault and partner assault. Um, the protections of those that are reporting by not having their private lives displayed in past histories. Um, I will say that Philip Cohen's testimony, cross examination rather, of Cedric's testimony today, and asking him when he and his wife moved in, when did they decide to get married? How quick all that happened? I think he's inferring things that he should be ashamed of. I don't see how that has anything to do with Danny Masterson's defense. Do you? I ask you guys, do you? Does Sean Hawley asking how loud someone said no? How loud? Is that really relevant to Danny Masterson's defense? Or does that kind of cross a little bit too close to 402 and victim blaming? I want Danny Masterson to have a fair trial. I do. But let's go for the facts. Okay. Show me how he couldn't have done it. Show me that. One thing you probably won't hear is Danny Masterson taking that stand and saying he didn't do it. And yes, Anna, I have seen that, and that's why I'm invested in this. They're trying to say that if you're in a relationship, basically, I kid you not, people, there are states trying to pass laws where you don't get to say no because you're in a relationship, you're married to someone. Yes, it's true. Don't get me started. Yes, Jen, she said, how loud? How loud? She said, did you say it loudly? They were the only two in the room. They were in bed. He was on top of her, face to face. And she wanted to know if she said no loudly. She wanted to know if she screamed, if she fought back. She did classic victim blaming actions. And then we heard testimony from an expert who says it's not common to do that. The shock of it being someone you know kind of outweighs everything. Exactly, always creative. I agree with you. Most people involved with the sexual assault, whether it be anybody around you or the victim themselves, they are not giving a lot of extraneous information. They're sticking to the details and the question that's asked. They're not adding fluff. It's a very uncomfortable thing to talk about. Humiliating, degrading. You're treating them like they're not even equal to you. Exactly. Way too much victim blaming. And then trying to justify their statements. I want him to have a good defense. But all I can say is support the strength that it takes to actually come forward. And there needs to be a better process. I'm not saying you have to believe it outright. Yes, you have to prove things. Yes, you do. And that's what this trial is about. It's also about the statute of limitations, okay? And how memories change from time to time and how it takes time for victims to realize when something happens to them. But they still get the right to do something about it when they do. And that's why I'm interested in this case. And I think I keep telling you that's why I'm interested in this case. I could care less if Danny Masterson is famous. And the Scientology angle is very interesting to me because it prevented the women from testifying. And because they have this notion that partners, that the person in the lead in the partnership, whatever they want goes, whether you want it or not. and that assault can't actually happen in a relationship. That's offensive to me. If that's a Scientology policy, like I'm totally against it. And this is what is intriguing me about the case. All of that I would push back on. Okay. I want Danny Masterson to have a fair trial, but I don't think people are coming forward because they don't like Danny Masterson. And I do not believe that this is an organized event against Scientology because they are huge with a lot of money. And the people that are fighting them don't have a lot of money and aren't huge. Why would they do that? Why? Their lives are hell and have been hell all along. Why would they do it? The motivation for money, well, the things that have happened to them have caused that motivation for money. Children in therapy because of things and harassment, that's not good. Okay. I let them have the civil lawsuit. Go ahead and defend yourself against it. All right. On that, that's it for me tonight. I will see you all. Actually, I shouldn't say tonight because in 30 minutes, I am going to be back. And I'm going to be back with something a little lighter and a lot more fun. We're going to be joining with Mallory to do Emadiaso. And I'm really looking forward to it. We'll let my hair down a little bit, have a little bit more fun, and put these serious things aside just for a little while. I don't forget about it often. But I would like to hear from you. I would like to hear from all of you on how some of the issues I brought up today and some of what the defense and the prosecution are doing in this case. That's what I want to talk about. I hope when I come back next Tuesday, or actually, yes, it'll be Wednesday. On Wednesday with Masterson, that the things that I brought up, maybe you'll want to talk about it. Because the last thing I want to do is to stand up here and just go over everything that you can read already from Tony Ortega or any of the articles. Okay. Part of this process for me is to put the information out and to see what I see and to see if you all are seeing anything, what you're seeing about it. Okay. That's why I do this. Okay. So hopefully we can have some more conversation, more questions. Well, I'll see you then. And for those of you that want to watch AIT, I will definitely see you all in 30 minutes with Mallory. Have a good night.